Tension on deck.
Afternoon, Ron. What's going on? How's things up there in the north? Everything good?
Yeah, everything's good. Everything's good. Sorry, that little glitch in the beginning there. YouTube's been acting up, so it's been glitching a little bit at the start of the show. Yeah, everything's good. How's everything down south?
It's all good. A little windy, a little rainy, but it's we've had a bit of a drought, so the rain is definitely welcome. So it's coming along.
Very good. Very good. A lot of stuff going on. Some stuff to talk about. Talk about today about basically cops being held to a higher standard, and then even when you're off duty, you have to watch what you say and what you do. The first thing we're going to talk about today is the Attorney General, Tish James. She announced this week an indictment and an arraignment for a former NYPD officer on manslaughter charges. This case happened actually in 2023, July of 2023. And then he was arrested and arraigned initially in June of 2025. And then he finally got indicted now. And, in the interim, and again, we're not here to sensationalize this actual case or to bring light to this officer and this specific incident, but more to just bring awareness to the members out there that as police officers, you are held to a higher standard, and your behavior, both on and off duty, whether police related or not, is going to be scrutinized. And here we see that we have just an off-duty officer. Story behind it, just a little backstory on this is the officer got up early, took a family member to the airport, did a day tour, went out with his friends upstate to some like tasting festival, some festival where he, went around and did some alcohol tastings. And then while driving home, struck a female on a motorcycle, and she died from her injuries on the scene. So the whole basis for this comes out of New York Executive Law 70B, which gives the Attorney General's Office a special investigations Office of Special Investigations, and they can assess every incident reported to it, which I think is important. Reported to it, where a police officer or a peace officer, including a corrections officer, may have caused the death of a person by an act or omission. Under the law, the officer may be on duty or off duty, and the decedent may be armed or unarmed. Also, the decedent may or may not be in custody or incarcerated. If the Office of Special Investigations assessment indicates the officer caused the death, the OSI proceeds to conduct a full investigation of the incident. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know how familiar you are with this. I honestly thought that only related to when an off-duty officer took police action of some sort.
Yeah, when I first just to let Lily know, next week I'm not here. She's asking if I'm here. Now next week, Joe Cortez is going to be on with Ron. I'm not going to be here next week, Lily, but this week I'm obviously here. But when I first read the article, right, and I looked at it, and then I read it again because the article said on and off duty. And that's when I sent it to you, because I was like, I didn't know about that. Like I did not think it was just I just thought it was on duty. I didn't think it was off duty, or like you just said, when it was on off duty and they took police action. So I was pretty amazed that they're literally scrutinizing you as a police officer while you're off duty. You could be doing anything. And I thought of a few different scenarios where you're not even really doing anything, and something tragically happens and somebody dies. I mean, if you want, and maybe we can go to a couple stories after we talk about, Kevin Richmond. But I just think that, because like you just said, we're not looking to say that the cop who's drinking and has a blood alcohol level of, zero point 0.08 at the time of the incident isn't he's culpable. I mean, he's responsible for his action. But I've read another one where the guy wasn't and still got, indicted and arrested. So, and then when I looked through Letitia James' report, I was amazed how many incidences there were of both on and off duty. And I felt that, when I spoke to you, I said, this is probably something that we should talk about, because I didn't know it. I didn't know it was off duty, just plain off duty. And then, like you said, you didn't know either. So I thought this might be a great idea to enlighten the cops and the people, even the citizens, right, and the families, to understand the scrutiny that these poor cops are under, right, all the other stuff, and this included. So I was crazy. So I don't know what, how'd you read the cases and stuff? What did you?
I looked back, and I actually, looked up the case and read through the case and read through his actual department trial, and Captain and Coke is saying, they love locking up cops. But we're not here defending his actions. We're not here saying that he's being over prosecuted, because the evidence does point to admitted drinking, and at the state troopers took a blood test at the hospital 4 hours later, because they had to get a warrant because he declined to voluntarily produce the sample. He didn't blow. And it was at 0.06. So I don't know if when she says 0.08, did they do some type of chemical composition and math that says that if we go backwards, it was 0.08 at the time, and that's something they're going to have to prove in his trial. But all the pretrial stuff, his indictment, he had a department trial, and he was terminated in November of 2023. So my assumption would be, and I hate making assumptions, but my assumption would be that he tried to retire and forced the job to give him his department trial, because normally you don't have a department trial where there are criminal charges pending. Normally they hold off on your department trial, and that actually gives the extension of the 18-month rule because there's a criminal investigation. But he must have tried to retire. And for those who don't know, when you try to retire while under investigation, you have to give the job 30 days to process your trial and come up with a conclusion. So he was tried. He pled not guilty. He was found guilty, and he was terminated under Ed Caban when he was the police commissioner in November of 2023. Again, it said 0.06. So again, we're not trying to sensationalize this officer's tragedy, the tragedy that this officer was involved in, that he likely caused by drinking and getting behind the wheel, and the tragic loss of life for this motorcyclist who was driving with her husband, down 80, I think it was 81. And so that's not again what we're trying to do. We're not trying to sensationalize a cop being locked up. That's not what we do on this show. So what we're trying to point out is, like you said, I knew that if you shot somebody off duty, they had eyes on it and they had the ability. I wasn't aware that if it wasn't police involved, like if you weren't taking police action, if you didn't choke somebody out, or if you didn't shoot somebody, or whatever the case may be, while taking some type of police action, that the state attorney general could take the case. And what's interesting in that law, like I said, was it's arrests that are reported to them. So part of the NYPD investigation, Internal Affairs, did make a conferral with the state attorney general, which I do believe is standard operating procedure with the NYPD when it comes to any death by a member of the service. Obviously, even an off-duty DUI incident. So yeah, so this is informational. again, we're not highlighting this one case, this one officer. We're not trying to put him on blast or anything like that. It's just a matter of trying to get that information out to people so you understand. And also, we're going to highlight with other examples of certain behaviors that you think you're doing in your personal life that you're going to be held to a higher standard on because of the fact that you're a police officer and the NYPD patrol guide does restrict you even in your personal life once you take the job.
Well, if you saw that on the website, there was also another one where this guy Tyler Paul, who was an NYPD police officer, this was happened in April 26, 2023. He was driving on the Grand Central Parkway in Queens, and he was driving at a high rate of speed. No alcohol, just driving at a high rate of speed. He ends up clipping another car. That car spins out, ends up crashing into a Mr. Edwards, who was working as a contractor for the Department of Transportation. And he was standing on the shoulder at the time. This officer ended up pleading guilty in Supreme Court in Queens, and was sentenced on January 23rd, 2025, just this year. He was sentenced to 1 to 3 times in prison for the charge of criminally negligent homicide, and 3.5 years in prison and 3 years of post-release supervision for the charge of assault in the 2nd degree. Now, you're not. I've sped. You've sped. We've all sped.
No,
I'm
not allowed.
No, you're good. You're good. You're the only one out of
how does a Tesla work when it's on self-drive and you're on the highway? Will it exceed the speed limit on self-drive? How does that work?
Yeah, but you have an affirmative defense that you weren't driving. So, so here's a guy that's just speeding, and they literally, because he's an off-duty police officer, and to me it's a tragic accident. He clipped that car. He didn't clip it intentionally. It was an accident. Okay, and then that car spun out. First of all, and I'll give you an example. On I-75 in Florida, the speed limit's 70. Even the people that are grayer hair than me, that hold the wheel like this and wear a hat, are doing 70 because it's a freeway. You can't do anything less. Okay, people are up your ass if you're on the slow lane doing 70. Okay, you can only imagine what it's like in the fast lane. Like it's bizarro world. But imagine that you're off duty and you're driving with the flow of traffic. I'll say the flow of traffic. Okay, now I know on the belt. I used to drive home on the belt, and the flow of traffic was 25 to 15 miles an hour. So there's no speeding on the belt. But if you're on the Grand Central and you start heading out towards Queens, out to the highway out that way, you can start moving. So this guy clipped somebody, and the next thing you know, he's serving jail time. So to me, it's just, is it an overreach? I don't know, but it's the standard that we are being held to as police officers, both on and off duty, which I don't think is fair. I think anybody else that might have said that, okay, it was an accident. We've seen accidents, right? So where there's no alcohol involved, then we kind of say it was an accident. And that's what it was. Now here's a guy that's serving jail time. So I think it's definitely an overreach from an attorney general who does not like police officers, from a city. Now you're talking state, and there's examples of Nassau County cops. There's examples. We spoke about the one case where the state trooper, right, killed that poor girl, Monica Goods. Remember, we spoke about that. That was also investigated by the attorney general and prosecuted. I think it's still ongoing. But here's the thing, where you have somebody in the state that is looking at everything you do, whether it's on or off duty. And years ago, like you said, if I took police action, then I was culpable or whatever. But listen, let's say I live in Orange County, New York, and I do something off duty. The local grand jury or the local prosecutor would investigate it and see what's going on. Now you have a state investigator, and I just think it's an overreach by them. But it's law, so there's nothing we're going to do about it. But unless we get somebody in the governorship that changes it. But right now, I'm telling you, police officers have to be careful. And that was one. I have another example, but if you want to talk about that example, I mean, I'd love to go
No,
over
go ahead,
it.
because I honestly only saw that one case that you sent. I didn't
Okay,
see the additional. So if you want to go through it, go ahead.
the other one, I mean, there were other ones where there wasn't alcohol involved, but this one had alcohol involved. But it's a husband and wife. The wife's driving. She's driving north on the Palisades Interstate Parkway, and her name is Bernadine Thomas. She's a police officer. So she's driving. The husband's in the passenger seat. Now, from the reading what I got, she had a .10 alcohol level. So I mean, she's drunk, right? She's obviously more than intoxicated. She's drunk. I don't know how drunk he was, if he's in the seat and letting her drive, right? But I can only imagine. But tragically, they rear off the road, and he gets killed. They hit into the side of the shrubbery or whatever, the tree on the side of the road, and he gets killed. She gets charged with criminal negligent homicide. Now, I can understand the charge and a little bit of the prosecution, but I'm just to me it's like she isn't she really kind of like suffered enough. Tragically, her husband's dead. She caused his death, but then to be criminally charged for that, I mean, I get it, but
Yeah.
normally, if I was on the grand jury or if I was there, I don't think I would go for, let's say I was on the jury, because you're going to get indicted no matter what. If I was on a jury, I would have a little bit, I think this person suffered enough or whatever. But I'm just saying, I just think it's tragic that happened. But here's the bottom line: when you're off duty, and alcohol should not be in play at all at any time you get behind the wheel. I don't care what it is, right? There's too many Ubers. There's too many taxis that you could take. This is definitely a bad thing, So
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree a little bit in that being a cop, not being a cop, it doesn't matter. If you're behind the wheel and you're impaired and you cause someone's injury or God forbid a death, you have to be held culpable. What I don't agree with is the state attorney general taking over the case at a state level when you have the Queens County District Attorney who's going to prosecute that case. They're not going to chicane that case. They're going to prosecute that case.
Which one we're talking about? On Grand Central?
The one on the Grand Central, right? That you just said with the husband and wife, right? So they're going to prosecute that female cop. So it's not like they're taking over a case that they feel is being handled improperly. They're just taking the case because the sake of it's a cop, and they have their Office of Special Investigation that just is anti-cop. We know that her office is anti-cop.
Yeah,
and they're gonna, maybe I don't know. I don't know what the benefit of the state attorney general taking that case from the local jurisdiction away is, just because they're law enforcement and it doesn't involve them taking police action. So that's my main concern. And again, like you said, I didn't read through all the different cases, but just the fact that they're going to take over. I mean, listen, if you had a corrupt DA's office, or you had a DA's office that's going to overlook things because it's a cop, we don't have that here in New York. None of the district attorneys in New York are going to overlook anything that a cop does. We're over scrutinized. That's one of the things that we want to point out here today, is that you really have to be so very careful, because as a police officer, you are going to have all of your actions, both on and off duty, in your professional life and your personal life, heavily scrutinized. And we're going to get into another topic of things that people do every single day that could possibly get you jammed up and or sued and or federally charged, depending on what it is. But just a quick shout out. Joe Cortesas is in the chat today saying interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to getting together with you next week and going over some interesting cases.
Yeah, I got a
about
bone.
facial recognition.
I got a bone to pick with Joe.
Go ahead.
Every time I take off, Joe comes on the show. So I don't know. He doesn't want to talk to me.
Second time he did his interview.
He's 2 for 2.
He did his. He got more of a bone to pick with Raganella. He's been on the show more.
Yeah, but no, one time I was on with him though. I remember I was canceled, then I came back on.
Yeah, then you canceled your cancel.
Yeah,
and we had a threesome. But yeah, we're gonna see how it goes with Joe. Like I said, we're gonna talk about facial recognition, which is really his forte. So I'm gonna be learning. I'm gonna, be looking into some stuff this week coming up to it. But looking forward to Joe being on. We got a lot of positive feedback from his interview. So going to enjoy chatting with him while you're
listen, what you do, you take a poster and put it in front of your face and see if he can actually give facial recognition to the poster and see if you're real. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I agree. I just think, to me, is what was the necessity to have this law passed, right? That the Attorney General has the prosecutorial rights to do this to police officers, and not only that, there was another case where a corrections officer, okay, an individual was seen by the correction officer from the booth, a little bit disarray or whatever, and they took the 2 inmates took that prisoner back to his cell. He was out of sight now by the corrections officer. After, I guess, whatever lockdown or whatever, he was checked a couple times, but he was laid in his bed, and they ended up finding out that he wasn't moving, and then they came in. So they questioned whether or not, first aid. So that's another important thing for every cop to know out there. You got to do first aid. And they also questioned whether or not Narcan was distributed. Now, to me, that was kind of odd, because what the hell is this guy doing with, heroin or any other type of opiate inside the jail where they think that Narcan should have been involved. But it just goes to prove you that as a police officer, you have to make sure that you follow all the procedures that are set forth, right? For you and I, it was a rush on the bus. And we really, I mean, you were an EMT, so you may have done a little bit more than me, but I was an EMT. So all we did was put a rush on the bus. Sometimes if it got that really bad, we would transport. But now they want you to start first aid, right? Make sure you're breathing, ABCs, right? Airway, breathing, circulation. So I'm telling you, if even if you don't know how to do it, and not that you don't know how to do it, everybody's been trained in it. But if you're not proficient in it, you better attempt it, because you could see how you're going to be scrutinized. And the 3 things they looked at, I forget if I have it right here. Let's see. There was 3 things they were looked at. They looked at the death, the defined officer, and the causation. So what did you do to cause that death, or you didn't do? So remember that every one of you on the job, and this can go as far as outside the job, right? Because we see that it goes on to other law enforcement throughout the country about first aid. You look at Minneapolis, right? The George Floyd, everything. So it's all scrutinized. So if you're trained in something and you don't perform properly, they can say, well, the causation was that you didn't perform it properly, and now you're going to be criminally liable. So I mean, it's a really heavily added pressure that I know I didn't have, but I think that you and I both want to let everybody know about it so that they can protect themselves. Because to me, this was really, it was disheartening to know that you're going to be prosecuted like this, and such a criminal. Like, listen, I didn't trust the DAs, right? I didn't trust the DAs in the city when I was working. You figured, but there was that old saying, right? Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Right. I don't know if that's even true anymore, because you're going to end up in jail. So I'm just saying, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, you see more and more cops, the cops don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore at all.
Nope.
They're over scrutinized. You see that, that one case of the one officer who was arrested for assault, that the DA found that, the first 6 punches were good, but the last 3 punches were no good, which, in a matter of, like 1.5 seconds. Again, we're back to the same argument that we've had in the past, where people are being scrutinized from the body worn camera, from surveillance video and everything else, where, you know, you don't have, you know, you're not supposed to be looking at these things from hindsight, right? Hindsight being 2020. Police officers supposed to get that the look from another reasonable officer in the same position, and not from 2020 hindsight when you're sitting there and you can slow motion click and click and click, and check everything out. And here we have Ernie Morales. Unfortunately, in today's law enforcement environment, police officers should protect themselves with personal liability insurance. Ernie, great to see you in the chat. Ernie, a friend of mine, my former XO at the Housing Borough, Bronx, Queens, former police chief. It's Ernie. Throw it in the chat. I'm sorry.
Wasn't he commissioner in Mount Vernon?
He was a first deputy commissioner, and then he went out. He went out west. Ernie, please put it in the chat where you were the chief of police. It's skipping my mind right now. But yeah, and that's true. You know, to have a personal umbrella policy to cover yourself because of, you know, we lost qualified immunity, right? So that's a great point Ernie's bringing out is, you know, everybody should have a personal umbrella policy. To this day, I still have one myself, just to cover yourself and cover your family, because you don't get a fair shake out there anymore.
No, definitely not. Not when you're being scrutinized every which way, to left to right and up and down. No way. You said Minnesota? Yeah.
Minnesota, yeah, the Minnesota MTA police. He was the police chief. Avid runner, has done the marathons all around the world, and former Navy officer. So thank you for being here, Ernie. Thanks for your service. It was for the country and for the police department. Multiple police departments, I might add. Yeah. So yeah, it's just, you know, read, is it in effect for only MOS or other civil servants that carry a firearm?
So it did say peace officers.
Yeah.
You know, it did define not just police officers, but peace officers, corrections officers that added in. So I would even imagine that if a corrections officer is off duty, he's going to be, you know, anybody off duty, because it specifically, I was kind of convoluted when I first read it. Like, it didn't say off duty, but then it says later on, it says, you know, on and off duty. So it's just, it's like, it's a double scrutiny. And they literally they take the case away from, you know, the local jurisdiction. So if, in other words, if it happened in Bronx County, they take it away from the Bronx DA. If it happened in Rockland County, they take it away from the Rockland County. And then they investigate it. I think they have like 24 assistants. I got, 11 legal people, 9 offices throughout the city that they have the capability. So this is pretty set up to really investigate. And listen, I'm not saying that it's totally bad, because there's been incidences where they've investigated it and then they've referred it back to the local jurisdiction, or whether because they couldn't prove the 3 things, the death, the defined officer, or the causation didn't fit in their criteria. So, but it is it's a higher level of scrutiny, and it's to me, I mean, I guess all DAs are somewhat politically driven, but I think this is a little bit of a higher level now. So.
Yeah, and TC saying that peace officers don't always carry, but like we said, this doesn't have to be firearm related at all. And that's the thing that really catches me, you know, a little bit, because again, you know, if you're not taking police action, you know, you're in your personal civilian capacity, which really doesn't exist, unfortunately. You know, they always say you're a police officer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? We're not getting paid for that. You know, you have to take certain actions when you're off duty. You know, you're liable to at minimum to call 911 to observe. You're not required to actually proactively engage in something off duty, but you know, this is just more proof that once you become a police officer, that it's just, it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because you make mistakes in your personal life, which we all do, right? Everybody makes mistakes in their personal life, and now you're being over scrutinized for it when it has absolutely nothing to do with your job.
No.
Nothing to do. Has nothing to do with police work, has nothing to do with a case you were working on. It has nothing to do with taking police action, not taking police action, being involved in something criminal. So, it's sad. It's sad.
Imagine you're at your house, right? You're having a barbecue. You're having a few beers. And all of a sudden you decide, I'm going to get on my ATV, my all-terrain vehicle, cruise around the house. You got a guy working on the house. I mean, he's on a ladder, working on your roof. You hit the friggin' ladder. He falls, dies. Next, you know what? You know who's investigating you? The New York State Attorney General's office. Yeah. As odd and bizarre that is, that will happen. Why? Because you caused a death, right? There's a death. You are a defined officer, and the causation was because you were drinking and you're on your own ATV on your own property. Could you imagine that? I mean, I get you're going to be investigated, like you said, either way, right? Yeah. But I mean, it's just to me, it just takes a whole nother level, and I think it should have been defined as an officer on duty. And then it should have been an officer off duty taking police action, like you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I agree. And then Reed says, issue is now that Tish does not wait for criminal charges to be over. MOS can be fired before this even goes before a judge. Total change from years ago when the department waited for court decisions. The department still will wait for court decisions, Reed, but when there's overwhelming evidence, and there's a reason for that, because anything that you say under the patrol guide procedure for interrogations of members of service cannot be used against you in a criminal proceeding. So they don't want you to have things said that will come out later, and then the defense can say, well, that you garnered that information through improper channels instead of a proper investigation, and then have that evidence now suppressed. Whereas if you try to retire while under investigation, the job can hold you up, and you have to give the job 30 days to prosecute you, which I believe might have happened here, where he kind of knew this wasn't going to go good for him, and he tried to, vest out because he didn't have his 20 years, and then the job gives you a department trial at that point, and it went through the process. He was found, guilty, and he was terminated because of the mitigating circumstances in the disciplinary matrix because there was a death involved, which I don't disagree with.
No. What I also found disheartening when I was reading through this was that, and I kind of understand it a little bit, but I just think it should be a two-way street here. What happens is the investigators, they go out and they investigate it. And the first thing they really do is they talk to the family members of the victim, the person that had passed away. And they, will interview them, and any release of body worn camera, they allow them to review it first, anything else. But what bothered me was that they offer them psychological guidance, and free help. And I just thought, that's okay, that's fine. But what about the police officer, right? The police officer just was involved. It could be a justified shooting, right? It could have been that the guy was coming at you with a knife. You had nowhere to go. You shot him and you unfortunately killed him. But do they care about the well-being of the officers? No, it reverts right back to the victim. And that's where I think some of these things that are written are one-sided, and you have to take into consideration both sides, and often they don't. And they're only looking to appease the one side that look at the oversight, look at what we do to make sure that the police officer are accountable. But underneath that, they say, we don't really care about what happened to the cop. We don't care about that. And I know there's stuff that the cops can go to, but.
And TC is saying these examples don't make anyone sympathetic to a cop. listen, these are the exceptions and not the rules. We're not trying to, we're not
No.
picking sides on the criminal cases. We're not saying that the cops shouldn't be prosecuted. We're not saying the cops did not do wrong. We're not trying to, be those guys that the cop can never do wrong, and we're going to stick up and we're going to say that the cop is always right and justified in their actions. That's not the point. The point of this conversation is that when you do something that you should be prosecuted for, why should the state attorney general be the one to take over the case just because of your status as a police officer? And I'm just gonna say something to one of in the chat. Mike is here. 123. You're free to say whatever you want to say. Opposition meets opportunity. It's a First Amendment platform, but I just ask that you just slow down the comments. You kind of being overbearing in the comments. Allow other people to get through in the comments so that their comments don't get lost up in yours. That's all I'm asking.
And to your point, like, we're not saying that somebody that drank and now is inebriated or whatever, and causes the death of somebody shouldn't be prosecuted. Absolutely. But what we're trying to do today, or at least on my part, and I think you agree, Ron, on your part, was to make awareness, because I was completely unaware of this until I read the article. So I just want to make sure officers out there are aware about the conduct on your off duty. Because years ago, when they taught us when you're off duty, that the laws of arrest, you can arrest somebody for a felony or misdemeanor. You weren't supposed to do anything for a violation, and then they caveat it with, but the best thing to do is call 911. Right? That's what they wanted you to do. This way, on duty officers would come and take care of the situation, because then you're not personally involved in it. But things happen, and I'm just going to say that you're going to be held to this higher standard as if you were actually on duty. And now even things that you do where you're not even acting as a police officer, you are now again, going to be held accountable, like seriously accountable as a police officer, off duty, not doing anything with the functions of your job. You will be held accountable. Again, speeding, reckless, intoxicated. They even talked about somebody distracted. They were looking to see if somebody was distracted when they had the accident. So if you're on your phone, if you drop your phone and you're reaching for your phone, and God forbid you clip somebody at a high speed, you can also be held accountable that way. So I mean, it's just, to me, it's a far reach, but it's advice that needs to be put out there. You have to.
Yeah. So let's move on. Anything else on this?
No, I just, like I said,
Yeah. So there's been a lot of chatter online, going back and forth. Sal Greco on the Sal Greco show on his network put out a story. It's been regenerated, and Sanders jumped on it about a texting scandal that's going on up in Manhattan North Narcotics. I don't know that it's a scandal, but there seems to have been some inappropriate text messages being sent in a group chat at work. And some of it was anti-Semitic, some of it was anti-Black with KKK. Some pictures are reportedly, AI generated. I'm going to put up one that he had posted that he says was in this group chat. Absolutely inappropriate to be, that is supposed to be an AI generated picture. I don't know. I don't know if somebody would actually have that at work. It looks like they're sitting at their desk in narcotics, but it sparked the conversation, and that when you're in these text threads, the things that you're doing This is an AI generated photo right here, right? And guys are joking around. Maybe it's at the expense of this other officer. I don't know. Now this officer gets upset and drops a log that you're texting things about him or her, right? It happens all the time. And this is just one of those things where this is work related. It's at work. It's being circulated within a unit at work, but I'm sure it's happening off duty. We have a text thread with the Finest Unfiltered, and we text things back and forth. I would text with people in my units when I was, active on the job. I always kept it, above board because, especially as bosses, there's even more, liability with the job. But what cops have to understand is that in this day and age, it's all fun and games until somebody gets upset and drops the log or goes running to somebody else that wants to take a lawsuit on this because they are being discriminated against, or they're working under a hostile work environment or things like that. So it's not something that hasn't happened before. So that's why I don't think it's such a big scandal, and I don't think it equates to what Eric Sanders is saying is equating to all the prior Marlin commissions and NAP commissions and everything else. And now you have the Manhattan North narcotics text scandal. I don't think it's a scandal. I don't think it's a big scandal that is some type of systemic thing under Commissioner Tish that they're making it out to be. However, it's inappropriate. Everybody knows it's inappropriate at this point, but we're going to discuss instances where it just shows, you can't do this shit anymore. We didn't have cell phones when we were cops. Later on, we were bosses. We got cell phones, personal cell phones, work cell phones because we were executives. Now everybody has a cell phone. But it's just, you just can't be sending things like, somebody in a KKK hood around in a work environment.
Well, first of all, on your regular department phone, computer, you shouldn't be doing anything, because anything and everything could be, checked on any of those. Those aren't yours. Those aren't your devices. Don't believe that they need a subpoena for it. I've heard people say, oh, they need a subpoena. Bull crap. It's their property. They can go right into it. And they will. All right. So then guys will always have their own personal phones. And, it's a type of banter, I would say, but it comes to a point where there's a liability. There's a liability if somebody on that sees it and doesn't like it. You could be good all along, and everybody could be joking and laughing, and then all of a suddenly one thing triggers that person, and they're not happy about it anymore. Don't forget that things are often shared too, and you have wives, husbands, loved ones, kids that could see it, and the next thing that triggers something. So to me, it's just unnecessary. You want to have that type of banter, that type of text thread. Do what you want to do, friends or whatever, joke around. All right, that's fine, but you shouldn't involve the job. And I'll also say, if you're still on the job, you don't want to do that either, because you're subjected to discipline also. So you got to be very careful about what you do and what you put out there, because there is a vulnerability. And don't forget that you're at a particular scene, and they check a cell tower and that phone pings. They could end up getting a subpoena for that and say, hey, let me see if what'd you say here? What was done here on your phone? So it's a very touchy situation. So like you said earlier, just want to stay away from that stuff for now. You know, that's it's banter, it's crap that could end up getting you in trouble. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, people don't realize, like you said, you know, do that with your friends and everything else on your personal self. You can't. As a cop, you can't. Let's just real quick just run through. We're not blowing up any specific case. We're not sensationalizing any incident or anything else, but just a quick Google search just shows you case after case. Right? A captain's fired for sending explicit text messages and lewd photos to a cop. Listen, I don't know if they were in a personal relationship and then she got mad and then she dropped the log. You can't do it. You can't do it, right? Officer sent vile texts to herself and then claimed coworkers were harassing her. So text messages gets this one in trouble for trying to jam somebody else up, right? The NYPD officials orchestrated a smear campaign, right, using confidential details of her rape, and they got sued because there were text messages going back and forth about it. Top NY officials faulted by investigators for demeaning social media. So it's not just text messages, it's all your social media. It's your Instagram, it's your Facebook, it's your X account, it's WhatsApp, it's everything. So it's all social media platforms besides your text messages, right? Yeah, you had unveiled text messages from New Yorkers in 2020. They were going to the Black Matters protest up in Mott Haven, right? That's the ones where, you know, you have the infamous picture of Eric Dim on top of the car, right? And I'm not saying Eric Dim was involved in this. I'm just making the reference to the same protests, right? You were there, right? Encouraging one another to have fun and kick their ass before police, you know, of course, now they put beat, pepper sprayed, and arrested hundreds of people according to copies of messages made public in connection with a pending lawsuit. So they sued and they're able to get these text messages. And people don't realize that text messages, even when you delete them, is still in the other person's phone. So the person that's making the complaint has a copy of the text message. And they can also subpoena the carrier who normally carries and keeps on file in their system for a certain amount of time all text messages that have gone back and forth, whether they're deleted or not. Right? Another one. Right? An officer files a $30 million lawsuit accusing supervisors of sexual harassment. And this had to do with text messages once again. So it's just case after case after case where you see people getting jammed up because of being stupid with text messages and being inappropriate and thinking that it's okay because it was their private, you know, cell phones. And that's just not the case.
You know, the other thing is, if you're looking to be a police officer, right? If you're a candidate to become on the job, not so sure, but I know for a fact other agencies do it. Like if you talk about, you know, state
Do a
police,
social media scrub.
yeah, you know, Middletown PD up in Orange County, you know, they all do it, and you have to give over your phone and let them go through your social media account, and then whatever they do. But that's all a history that they look at, you know, and I know that they, you know, years ago, right, they used to look at, you know, see if you're a gang member and stuff, if you're hanging out with gang members, holding guns and stuff. So, I mean, all of this stuff, social media is, yeah, it's great. It's informational. It's, you know, fast paced. You know, you get stuff a hell of a lot faster than I did when I was growing up. When I was a kid, you had to wait for the 6 o'clock news to come on with Ernie Anastas, who's going to tell you everything that's going on in the world. But at least it was honest news too at the time. But anyway, so the social media is great, but you know, you have to protect you. Another case of you have to protect yourself, right? So we talked about Letitia James and executive law section 70-B, and now this, you got to protect yourself. I know, I saw it. I was ignoring it. I was ignoring it. I think it might have been solicited. No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't say a word.
You didn't DM him? You didn't direct
I
message
don't
him?
have Sleepy Joe's. I don't. No, you could subpoena my phone.
I think you changed your handle, and that's your Sleepy Joe. I got it. Just gonna give yourself like 100 spot-ons.
There you go.
But yeah, you got to protect yourself. It is. So craziness.
Yeah, like Mike is here 123 says, the internet lasts forever. These social media posts and everything that go out there, it didn't take anything for us to subpoena people's Instagrams and everything else, so that even if it was deleted, that we had it memorialized. When you're conducting investigations, you can do that. So it's just it's again, it's a matter of when you take this job, you're told that you're being held to a higher standard. And that higher standard is not just while you're out there in uniform and performing your duties. And so when you're doing these things and you're doing them and you're home in your living room and you're texting with your buddy, or you guys are, you're on Facebook Messenger, or you're on Instagram and you put a post out, or you're liking posts, right? Look at the scrutiny that the mayor's wife got for liking those posts from, the attacks in Gaza, right? In Israel, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to be associated with, if you're liking something, you're saying you're agreeing with something, and you're agreeing with that person and the statement that person made. So therefore, if you make a post, if you comment and respond to people's posts, whether you agree or disagree, if you get into a pissing match with somebody and you're saying inappropriate things, now I can do it. You can do it. We're Ron Layson, right? We're Rob Lukash, right? We no longer have that association to the police department. But you may not be able to be prosecuted for saying vile or disgusting things. You can get online and I could say vile and disgusting things, and that's covered by the First Amendment. That doesn't mean that I can't be disciplined by my job, because my job is allowed to have hold restrictions on you. And let's take a look at that, right? So this is the social media policy, which is now, they moved it over into, I had fun finding it, right? They moved it over to the administrative guide from the patrol guide. But what's the policy on personal social media accounts, right? The department recognizing that personal social media accounts are utilized by members of the service. As such, members of the service who post, transmit, share, disseminate, and or comment on content via their personal social media accounts must do so in strict compliance with the provisions contained in this procedure and the rest of the department manual. Members of the service who violate this policy will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal. So they're talking about your personal social media accounts, and that you are being held to these standards, right? So it tells you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do in your social media accounts, right? You can't post, share, or transmit. Now, everybody violates this, because everybody takes selfies at work or pictures at work, and then they post them on the department, on their social media account. So if you get involved with something or somebody drops a log on you, you're giving them an easy hit. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts. It's a violation of department policy to post yourself at work, right? So you can't post or disseminate anything from the department, right? Any identifiers, and you can't use like NYPD John Doe, 5-3 precinct Jane Doe, whatever the case like that. You can't put like any NYPD monikers inside of your handle, right? Do not post, transmit, share, and or disseminate department affiliations of other individuals, including but not limited to the individual posting, tagging, and or sharing pictures of other members of the service without express consent of that individual. So if you take a picture of the detail and you don't have permission and somebody sees it, you get banged for it, right? No department facilities, badges, all that stuff, right? Here's one. Do not post, transmit, share, and or disseminate any content involving discourteous or disrespectful remarks. Wow. Who's going to say what is and what isn't disrespectful? Right? That's very subjective right there. In any form pertaining to issues of age, ethnicity, race, religion, gender, gender identity expression, sexual orientation, and or disability. So when I call you an old fuck, I can get jammed up. That's age discrimination. And it expressly says that members of the service are to be cognizant of the fact that their social media activity, even on personal social media accounts, may be seen by the public as a statement on behalf of the department. Any activity that can be linked to a member of the service is a reflection on the department as a whole. So if anybody knows you're a cop, and 58 tells everybody you're a cop, they're saying that when you speak, you're speaking as if you're a reflection on the department and you're speaking on behalf of the department. That's what the patrol guide is telling you. Members of the service are reminded that they are strictly accountable for their conduct at all times, inside and outside of New York City, whether on or off duty, including the use of personal social media accounts. Activities and or statements made on social media sites are done so in an online domain where no reasonable expectation of privacy exists. And then it goes on, you know, with all the rest of the BS. So right there, they're telling you, where you know, people think that their personal rights and their constitutional rights are being infringed upon. And we've talked about this in the past. There's a difference between being legally liable for saying defamatory things and saying things that are discourteous and things that are disrespectful and vile and disgusting and everything else that a lot of these people say out there, and things that people post. You can't be prosecuted for it. But when you put it out there, like you said, there's no expectation of privacy when you put it out there into the universe. And then there was the issue where people were identifying where people worked, right? And those people were getting terminated for their private X posts or Facebook posts or Instagram posts or whatever the case may be. And the law is clear. The job can hold those restrictions against you.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the catch-all, that one thing that says, you know, a reflection of the department. That's how they get you. And you know, that's why often, I think in the patrol guide procedure, I don't know where it is now because it's been years, but if you were going to go do a presentation off duty and you got permission, and I believe it had to go all the way up to the police commissioner for you to go and talk, you were specifically told not to say anything or to preface it with, these are my opinions and not the opinions or any reflection on the NYPD. So they want to keep their hands out. They want, obviously they're the deep pockets and they don't want to be, you know, sued. So, you know, and Reed had made mention to it a little while ago. You can have a private group that you're texting, and maybe that it's, you know, held within that particular group, but if they repost it or they send it out to somebody else, it gets out. So you just need to make sure that you have to stay within the boundaries and what the patrol guide says, because they will, when they want to, get you. You know, they can get you at any given time, and it could also be that they didn't get you for that, but through the investigation, they find out. I mean, if you remember years ago, there was a big problem with people taking pictures of crime scenes and then disseminating them. And then, because you weren't supposed to put anything out, and it was Rosario, that it could be held in court. So there was a whole big procedure about doing that as well, and making sure that you didn't send out any photos or anything else. Basically, what you want to do is you want to stay away from social media if you can. I don't know if you could get your, wife or spouse, husband, cousin to give you a phone and do your social media on that, and then it's really not your phone. I don't know if they could, eventually link you, but I wouldn't put it past them. But if you're gonna have a phone, it's gonna be in your name. You carry it on, on duty with you. So when your wife calls, she doesn't call you on the department phone. She calls you on your personal phone. You got to be careful anything that you put out there on social media, anything that you do with that phone, because you're going to be held to that higher standard. So, I mean, I think Sleepy Joe mentioned it earlier on that retirement is liberation. I always said you did a sentence. You were assigned a sentence. You had to follow the rules. You had to eat your meal, do things, everything that was regimented, given to you. You had to do that right, and then when you finally retire, you're able to do somewhat what you want to. Although we're so conditioned to, we almost don't do things differently. We kind of creatures of habit. So, but
Yeah. So TC says, imagine you're on a witness stand and the defense pulls up your socials. Tell me how you'd feel, embarrassed or proud. Better to have none. And that's
yeah,
one of the points behind the job's position, is that this could carry over into a credibility issue. So you have these knuckleheads up in Manhattan North Narcotics who are passing around these white hooded photos, talking about anti-Semitic things, talking about anti-Black things, whatever they're talking about, whether they're joking, it's not funny, but they're joking around with each other. They think it's funny. Everybody in the chat thinks it's funny until somebody thinks it's not funny, right? And I think that's what happened, is somebody didn't get a gig, didn't get a job in a certain detail, and they retired, and then they dropped a lawsuit on this, supposedly, from what Sal's reported. But it comes to a credibility issue also. So if you're posting these things, and then next thing you know, you're on the witness stand, and your social media can be brought up. There's no expectation of privacy. And, if you're bringing these things up and you're making silly comments, replying to stupid posts that everybody passes around, and, how many times are we scrolling down, I only really have X, and you see something really stupid, right? But if I like it, or if I comment on it, that's there forever. And if somebody sees it and they memorialize it and they go, he's a cop. He's a cop on my brother's case. The perps could be following you under pseudonyms, and you wouldn't even know it. And next thing you know, the defense is throwing that up, and they're going to discredit you on the stand. Next thing you know, you're going on the Brady list, and you're not able to testify anymore.
Not the Brady Bunch. You're going on the Brady list.
You're still going to be able to be deputy commissioner.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're responsible, right? So they're going to hold you responsible, and anything could happen. You put something up there, and it might not be of a, craziness that you think of it that day, but as it goes on, it could definitely turn into that. So you're best to protect yourself, make sure that you understand everything. I mean, there's a lot of pressures, there's internal pressures, and this is one of them. So you need to make sure you don't want to give them anything. That was the old adage. You don't want to give them something that they could get you for. So if you can protect yourself, that would be the best thing to do, is, keep your You can laugh and you can look at the stuff in private or whatever, but you don't need to do a group chat. And listen, I can understand where maybe somebody made that. If it was AI generated, I'll give you a scenario. Let's say they were out on a case and somebody said, "Oh, the cop, I arrested the guy," and the guy says, "Hey, you're just like the KKK," right? So then it's up. Oh, it's a big joke. Ha 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 ha. And then when they get back to the base, right? Somebody does an AI and sends it out. And you know what? If you look at it and say, it's a joke. Look at this. Because when you look at that photo, it doesn't. The neck looks shorter than the head. So I don't know. And I would hope and I would pray that it's AI generated and they don't have a KKK hood in the narcotics bureau. That would be that would be offset. But if I can understand the joke, but you have to understand the implications of the job. And you look at now how it leaked out. All right, somebody leaked it out. So nothing is sacred anymore. All right. So if you're going to do things, do it to protect yourself. If you're on, I think we should talk about supervisors a little bit. But if you're on that chat and you see this shit going down, get off of it, man. You don't need to be on it. All right. Get notified for overtime some other way. Get notified for RDO court some other way. Just between you and the boss or whatever. But I would say you got to get off of that stuff because it has implications later on. And listen, even when you retire and you're going to do that, if you go for another job or somewhere else, that's also they can look at that. They could look you up very easily and find out. So I mean, it could
especially
be.
you got somebody like Sal who's blasting out people by their names.
Yeah.
So now when you do searches, those things come up. If he puts the name in his X post, AI, when I run the name, will pull that up to Sal's X post.
Yeah.
Right. And so when somebody's searching somebody's name, that X post is going to come up. Now they're going to read it and see this person is reporting for, that Rob Lukash was involved in a text scandal where they were talking anti-Semitic and anti-Black, and they were passing around pictures of the Ku Klux Klan. And like you said, as inappropriate as that joke is, cops have a dark humor, right? And like you said, if they're out there, and we've heard it, right? We've been at protests, KKK, this, that, and the other thing. They're calling us KKK, and whatever. I don't remember exactly what the chants were, but KKK, blah, 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 and then they rhyme it off, right? So now, like you said, now somebody goes back and somebody was standing in Rob Lukash's face screaming, "You're a KKK, you're a Klansman, you hate Black people." Meanwhile, you're just standing at a protest there to protect people on both sides, right? And like you said, now your partner thinks it's funny to send you a picture, right? In a hood, similar to kind of, I don't know, it's not really similar, but I'll liken it to a picture in a recent text thread of somebody who's on a cruise ship, and there might have been an AI generated that person in a Speedo, right? Because we could joke around. I don't want to relate the two because they have nothing to do with one another, but it's just a point where you find something funny and you're ribbing it at people, right? And so the cops thought it was funny to do an AI generated thing of Rob Lukash sitting behind his desk with a KKK hood on because he just spent 8 hours getting screamed at being called the Klan. So to your point, that's where the joke originated from, albeit still inappropriate. And then you joke around back, which means now you're accepting you're buying into the KKK, picture transmission. You're not refuting it and saying, "Hey, that's inappropriate. You shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that shit." Blah 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 blah. Where you would now have a defense that you weren't a part of it. But once you play back into it, now you're accepting of it. So it could be totally taken that you are now, supporting the KKK movement or whatever the case may be. So everything gets put into the context that the people want to fit their narrative. And that we see all the time in social media. And like you started to say with the supervisors are in these chats, right? Like the only group chats I got in when I was a supervisor, maybe as a sergeant, we really didn't even have cell phones as much yet. We did, I guess. They started coming around, right? But not everybody had them when I was a sergeant. But you got to remember that once you become a supervisor, you can be friendly, but you're not really their friends. And you have to remember that. You're always going to be their boss. Even if you're sitting in their backyard having a beer and a hamburger at a barbecue, you're still their boss. And that becomes, right, the extension of the workplace. They talk about the cops that got in trouble for putting porno videos on the precinct trip bus down to Atlantic City, and a female made a complaint, and people got jammed up for it because it's an extension of the workplace, right? So people could say it's an extension of the workplace that we got together at a barbecue in Rob's backyard and we were having beers and they started calling me all kinds of KKK and everything else, or whatever else the case may be. And if you're there as a boss, you have certain responsibilities. And they don't allow you to separate those responsibilities because you're sitting in the backyard with them as Ron Layson, not as Sergeant Layson, and I'm having a beer with them. So it's a slippery slope, and you have to be really careful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as a supervisor, right, you have reporting requirements. So if you see certain things like that, well, first of all, in my opinion, if you have every cop's number, I get it, as a team type of effort, you want to maybe keep one chat or whatever where everybody's together, so everybody's on the same page. And I can understand, you know, giving heads up and stuff like that, like who's going to be in the team tonight, who's not going to be, or whatever. But it has to be a professional chat, and that's where it should stay. Again, the reporting requirements for, you know, supervisors are not stopped, you know, anywhere. It doesn't say, you know, when you off duty or anything else, you see something that's relative to that, and like you said, it's in the extension of a job. Then you got to be very careful, and especially on phones like that. If you're a supervisor and they're chatting like that or sending pictures, it's all fun, it's all good until it's not no more, right? And then it becomes a problem, and then it'll snowball. It's like, what did you report this? Your obligation, and like I said, if you're a supervisor, get off that chat. You don't need to be on any of the chats. And if it turns where you're on a chat and it's not professional anymore, it's not about job related things, then get off of it. Just leave. And you know, you can direct message anybody that's on the team, you know, directly, and give back information. But you really need to be careful. I mean, you know, like you said, social media stays there forever. I mean, you know, I've applied for a few jobs in Florida, and as soon as they do my social media scrub and they says I'm associated with Ron Layson, I don't get the job.
That's it.
So I mean, it's just I try, but you know, I still I said I love you so much, I still have to do the podcast. So.
Oh, you're the best. Delray 53, another friend of the podcast. I was told in BMOC, which is the basic course for sergeants promotions, you're not one of the boys anymore, and that's the truth. And I learned something in BMOC when I was young too. Is, you know, when the shots start flowing, the bosses should start going, right. You don't want to be around when things get sillier, because you are a mandated reporter when things happen. You know, it just.
Did they do that video? It's your call, Sarge, when you were in BMOC? Did they show you a scenarios and then they stop it and then say, it's your call, Sergeant, what are you going to do? I mean, that was a pretty eye-awakening type of training as well. Better than listening to somebody talk for, you know, 10, 15 minutes and giving you a break. But because you're kind of like, oh, now you got to think as a supervisor, you know, it's not just the routine. It's not just going out there doing your job. It's you got to evaluate, you got to assess, you have to adapt, overcome all of those things. You kind of always have to do that. So And I always say, what you really want to do is protect your cops. If something's going awry like that, stop it. Put a stop to it right away. Okay, they might not thank you that day. They might see you freaking dick, bro. Why you stopping us? It was just a joke in this chat. Well, jokes have a tendency of, finally pissing somebody off, and then it definitely affects the whole team and everybody else. So keep it as a boss. Sometimes you don't have to be, you got to be there, like you've said in the past, like almost like the father or whatever. Say it's enough's enough. Let's go. Let's get back on the game time. So, I mean, it sucks because you want to joke around. It's fun to joke around, but it's also protecting the men and women that work for you. So, what do you got there?
Yeah, no, it's it just people have to understand, it's once you become the boss, that it it you're held to a higher level as a police officer, and the levels keep getting higher of standards that you're held to. And even in the disciplinary matrix, right? That's one of the mitigating circumstances. If you're a supervisor, you're supposed to know better. You're supposed to know better and not get involved in this kind of stuff. You know?
Yeah, no, that's part of your responsibility, right? So protect them, stop them when they. I mean, I always say it when I was in ESU. That I mean, the hardest part was stopping them from doing their job when I felt that they shouldn't be going in at that particular time. There was times where I knew we were going to go in. It was going to end up in something that we probably didn't want, the outcome we didn't want. So sometimes you got to hold people back. Sometimes you're not going to be liked for holding people back, but you got to do your job. That's what's important. So,
All right. Anything more on this one?
no, no.
So we've seen time and time again. We've talked about it, and again, politics has completely consumed the NYPD, and it continues. Mayor Mamdani, he made all of these promises, right, in his campaign, and now that he's in office, like we said before, he was even in office, that he doesn't have the authority to do certain things, right? So now you see it all coming out, right? Holtrell slams Mondami's push for higher taxes. She's not raising taxes, right? She's not raising the taxes. So what is he doing now? Now he wants to raise everybody's property taxes 9%. So all the promises that he's only going to tax the rich is not coming to fruition, even though he says that if you're a homeowner, you're rich, because he lived in a rent stabilized apartment. But so that's what he's doing. He's threatening 9.5% property tax increase, because if she's not going to tax the rich, he's going to tax everybody else. And then the obvious one just came out, right? Officially, his plan for free buses hits New York City pothole. Toll by only, it's just not financially feasible. They're not going to do it. Shocker. Shocker. You want to run for mayor saying everyone's going to have free bus rides. Doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. You don't have the authority to do that. Some things that he does have authority or influence over are things like when he promised that he was going to disband the gang, or he's going to not disband. That's what he's disbanding. He wants to disband the SRG, which he's still pushing for, and he's finding a hard time doing because they're necessary, as we've shown many times. But he talked that he is in favor for, and when he becomes mayor, he's going to eliminate the gang database, right? But now he's stepping back from his pledge on total elimination of the gang database. and he's talking that because there were some reforms that were put in, like notifying minors' parents when they're put into the gang database. It's just, we've said it all along. It's been said all throughout this network that you cannot eliminate the gang database. The gang data, nobody could, besides the rhetoric of what they say, with us casting such a wide net and pulling everybody in, and let me see what his vast dragnet, as he calls it, right, of how people are put into the gang database. Nobody in the city council who's pushed to eliminate the gang database, Mayor Mamdani and all of his socialist, communist party appointments that he's made, has come up with any evidence that the gang database is used in a nefarious way, in a negative way, that could impact negatively anybody on the gang database. The gang database is used to identify your affiliation with a gang so that we could use it as an investigative tool, especially when it comes to cases like this past week when the baby was shot and killed in front of the bodega in an apparent gang shooting, to look at who the suspect was, who the intended target was, find out what gang they're affiliated with, and find out who their rival gangs are so that you can deploy to try to prevent further violence from retaliation.
Yeah, it's funny that when it's needed, suddenly it becomes something that's necessity, something that helped, because it makes him look better, feel better, that, that there was an immediate arrest right away. And the fact that they never even mentioned the other baby that was shot, the fact that, that the individual was, as he was arrested, basically says he was retaliating and trying to get the father. Where there's a huge gang database that's always looked at and never really criticized by any politician, any police commissioner, anybody else, is 50A. That's a gang database. All right. At any given time, they can look us up. Even in retirement, they can still look you up. What about that? That's a gang database. I didn't ask to be put on that database. I didn't ask to remain on that database, and it serves no legitimate purpose either. Not for retired guys, and for active guys, it's an unfair disadvantage that people can go up and look up your history anywhere else. They can't look it up, and they're worried about a gang database where it's just a name, which helps to determine what gang somebody's associated with, affiliated with, and where there might be retaliation to prevent it. Proactive policing, precision policing, that's all part of that. So the idea that he, promises made, promises kept, I guess not, right? We lost the buses. He's filling potholes, though. So it was ironic that in that little article you put up, it said something about, filling holes. He was out there filling potholes. Big friggin' deal. Do your job. That's not your job. And it's ironic that all of a sudden now the gang database is going to be good because some sort of concessions were made, and whether they were or not, I don't know. But okay, that's good. That helps him. But the fact that most of the things that he said he could do, he's not doing any of them. The taxing or the rich and all the he's just falling short of everything that he's made. So he's not living up to what he wanted to do. So shame on the people who voted for him. Exactly.
Yeah, so it says here right in the article, the mayor on the campaign trail called the database a vast dragnet and said his administration wouldn't use the database, but he has moderated that position since taking office. I've made my critique of the database clear, and the NYPD has also implemented a number of reforms as per the recommendations that came through. Nothing to do with him, right? It's recommendations that came from the DOI. Mamdani said in an unrelated press conference on Monday, and the implementation of those reforms, the results of that are part of the active discussion that we are having. The active discussion that he's having is with Commissioner Tish, who pushes back, who does push back. Again, we have our critiques of Commissioner Tish. I've said it in the past. I think she's doing a good job as a manager of the police department. We all believe that the police commissioner should have come up through the ranks of the police department, so understand the culture of policing and have walked in the footsteps of the people that they are in charge of to understand the job. But as a manager, I don't think she's doing a horrible job. And I think that she has been pushing back. We've talked about that in the past on the incidents with, the ISIS inspired bombing, the snowball fight, all the shit that Mamdani wants to spew and play down. She has been very vocal, even when she's standing with him or near him at the podium. She's been very vocal about in support of the NYPD and the officers at large. So I think this is another one of those things where she has been vocal in the need for and the importance of the gang database. And again, people want to say what they want to say, but they bring no evidence to the table, no examples to the table where anyone's employment, anyone's school, anyone's life has been negatively impacted because they're on a gang database, because the gang database is not shared outside the NYPD and law enforcement community. It's not shared. If someone does a query and an inquiry to the NYPD, it's because people do that, right? Like we get the good guy letter when we leave saying that we left in good standing. But there are people that require for certain positions and certain jobs a letter from the NYPD basically stating that they're a good citizen, right? And if they're in the gang database, that's not going to preclude them from getting that letter. If they don't have a criminal record that's public, they're still going to get that letter. It's not going to hold them back. And Tish, even here, says, though the mayor's criticism of the database continued and that report came out, after the report came out, the mayor has recently stood alongside Police Commissioner Jessica Tish as she extolled the gang database and its help in preventing retaliation in situations involving gang violence. The point has been highlighted recently by the tragic death of the 7-month-old baby in Brooklyn, like you said, right? It gets downplayed that the 7-year-old's the 7-month-old, was it how old was the brother? 3 years old or something like that? Do you remember?
I think it was 3, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a 3-year-old was also shot and injured. And then you didn't hear that anywhere. Right? Are we going to set up for retaliation? Yes, Tish said, of the possible fallout from the possibly gang-related shooting that left the little girl dead on Thursday. We will look at the gang database, and that will help our deployment to prevent things like retaliatory shootings. We have been saying this from day one. This is police work 101. It's such a necessary tool. And the fact that they just don't like it because mostly people that are black or brown are in gangs, right? I'm sorry, I misspoke. Most gang members are black or brown. Not saying most black or brown people are in gangs. That was a complete misstatement by me. Most gang members are black or brown. So they say the majority of people in the gang database are people of color. Yes, but the majority of people in gangs are of color. It's the same thing when you talk about, the majority of people arrested for violence are people of color, but they're the perpetrators. We're not letting the non-people of color, the white people, get away because they're white if they commit crimes. You just see the violence in these neighborhoods are at a higher degree. So when you have to correlate the crimes versus the arrests. And it's the same thing here with the gang database, with the gang population versus the gang demographics.
It just seems to me he's backpedaling on quite a few things when, He looked at the spike in hate crimes, which we spoke about. I think it was last week, right? Was it last week we talked about the hate crimes? And Tish did a press conference, I think the day after or 2 days after. And she specifically said that she herself and nobody else changed the policy of the reporting requirements for hate crimes, which we spoke about, which we said that now it's going to be where this, goes back to reverts back to where the CO of the hate crimes task force, makes the final determination. And then they can determine whether or not it's a hate crime. But Mamdani seems to be backpedaling from everything that he can and kind of washing his hands from it. Even this gang database, he's like saying that it wasn't his decision. There was changes in it that represented he could then become acceptable then, So I think that just he's pulling himself away from things that he maybe as the mayor sees that he shouldn't really change because it was and is in the best interest of the citizens and police departments and law enforcement. Like you said, I think Lou Veloz, right, yesterday said that he reached out to the NYPD gang database and got information. So here's something that we're helping other law enforcement agencies, federal agencies, so that there's no retaliation, so that that the gangs don't take it a step further and continue and hurt innocent lives, right? When you saw, a young baby get shot on the streets, that was result of a gang activity. So unless you're going to prevent it, and if that database is a tool and only a tool, just like you mentioned, not something to derail somebody's life, not something that's, stuck with them forever, but literally something that, because there's a way to get out of that gang database. There's requirements that after a certain amount of time and there's no additional gang activity, you're removed. So I mean, there's actual ways to get out of that, and it's a useful tool to help and prevent the people in the city of New York. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of pushback in the comments for my
Why?
support. For my support of Jessica Tish and saying that I think she's a decent manager for the police department. And they're talking about how she's very heavy-handed with discipline. She's very heavy-handed where she's transferring people that are showing up late for details. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that's where I'm saying that her lack of knowledge and experience as a uniform member and having walked in the shoes of a cop that had to respond to details, had to go from home or bring their uniform home to go to a detail or leave home an extra hour early so they can go to the work, change into their uniform, then go from work to the detail site and maybe getting caught in traffic and things like that. Yeah, I agree with you that she's being heavy-handed with things like that. With discipline, I think she's very heavy-handed with discipline, where she's thinking of it from a corporate mindset instead of being empathetic to officers, because as much as she says us and we and the law enforcement, the NYPD and cops and this and that, she was never a cop. She was never a cop, never a sergeant, never a lieutenant, never a captain, never an executive. Okay? So I understand that she's heavy-handed, but look at what we've had for the last three administrations. Okay, here she is pushing back. She isn't being a complete puppet to the mayor, to both the previous administration in Eric Adams or into Mamdani. She has not, when he is being silent, been silent. She is not, when he is forgetting to mention the fact that it was admitted and known to be an ISIS-inspired attack, to use those words of hate because it was Islamic and it might offend the Islamic mayor. She went out and said these things. So I give her credit for that. I give her credit for standing up and pushing back. And so rooting out some of the corruption, not all of it. I still don't understand how Tanya is still in place when she was the overseer of all the overtime, is still the overseer of all the overtime. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I have a lot of questions. But like I said, as a manager, she's done a much better job than the last 3 administrations. And again, she has a lot, I believe, leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to discipline and things of that nature, because she doesn't understand. She's overly heavy-handed because she doesn't understand, because she didn't live and can't be empathetic to the situations. That's where I'm getting the pushback. So if you want to touch on that,
I mean,
you can push against me too. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not a big advocate of hers. I understand. What I will give her is credit for trying,
Yeah.
but I really don't believe that she has the the corporate knowledge to do the job. And she has to learn it, and that puts her at a disadvantage. Because and yes, there were major corruptions going on. There was a major scandal in the chief of department's office, a major scandal. Okay, so did she come in and start cleaning house? Yeah, I think if you took the last 3 police commissioners, you know, she's up there. She's up there as far as looking the other ones. But you know, I just think that corporate knowledge, and I think she needs maybe to surround herself a little bit more with more competent people, more people that she can trust, that are from the department, and maybe take a little more advice. I would have thought Mike LaPetri would have been a good choice for chief of department, and that he would have been a little bit more vocal to her and maybe whispered in her ear a little bit more, like, "Hey, this is the way it should go, and this way." And maybe she's not the type of person to take advice.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. But I
And
just think that, I mean, some have asked you in the comment to name like 3 things that she's done good. And just with that question, I was thinking, I don't know of 3 things that she's done to really raise morale and help the department. And it's very hard to do that at this point, because of all the external factors that we speak of. Right, we speak about the chokehold, the diaphragm law. We like the main topic today was Letitia James and the attorney general, and all these other things that are pushed down on a police officer, which she really doesn't have control of. So she has to manage that. And that in itself is difficulty, because you have to show the cops, you have to show the men and women out there doing a job that, I have support and I have your back, and then I'm willing to go the 9 yards for you. And I don't know necessarily, though, if she does that. So
John's not a fan.
I'm not. I can't. I can honestly say that I'm not really. I'm not saying she's the worst, but I'm not saying that
Listen,
I can say that she's done anything really. She's done nothing to give me the impression that she can handle the job. I mean, it's a very difficult job, but I mean, when we talk about, like, coming up through the ranks, they know every step of the way. When you talk, like, as much as I don't like Dermot Shea because of the things that were done and how I saw him cater to Mayor de Blasio during COVID, other than that, I had a high regard for him. I really did. But prior and after that, I saw how much of the policies and politics led him down a path where he was willing to do anything to stay in that position.
I completely agree. Him and O'Neill.
And O'Neill. And I go back to Ray Kelly, who I have the most admiration for, because he was you knew he was the boss. He was a strong boss. He came up through the ranks. He knew what was going on, and I felt he treated it fairly. So, I mean, that's the only part. I have the same pushback, the groups in the chat. But listen, I'm not saying she's bad either.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Listen, everybody's entitled to their perspective and their opinion. That's fine. And I'm not gonna not show show the opposition in the chat. You know, that's not what we do here. So, you know, listen, I appreciate it. And you know, John saying her legend is created by the media. She's awful. Absolutely, she has influence over the. You see the fluff piece after fluff piece being put out. So she absolutely has the media, has control and influence over what's put out in the media in this whole era of perception versus reality. Right? We talk about that all the time. John and Eric talk about that extensively. The perception versus reality. And you know, so whether that has to do with the proliferation of social media or not, I don't know what the answer is, but it's absolutely where they're trying to push their narrative out, and they absolutely use the media, and the media absolutely follows their narrative. So there's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
And,
no,
you know, Reed saying with Ray
just-
Kelly, the department had one voice and it was his. I thought he was a micromanager, but after seeing these scandals, I understand why. And that's 100% true. That's 100% true. You know,
can you bring QC Beast up 478, because that is a great statement too, right? So yeah, O'Neill, when he was a CO with a 4.4, I knew him. I knew him when he was a CO with a 2.5. Monahan, who I thought was very, very extremely intelligent, knew perpetrators. CO with a of the 3.4. You know, Steve Bonanno was his XO up there. I mean, a lot of hard work went out there. You know, Shea, I don't know specifically what commands he was, but you know, he came up through the ranks or whatever, and they did exactly what QC Beast is saying. They all sold themselves for themselves. They put themselves in front of in front of everybody else, and that wasn't their job. Their job was to lead us and push us forward, and they didn't. They wanted to be in the limelight. They wanted to do whatever they could. So I totally agree with QC Beast on that one. My God, it was sad.
yeah, and it was so obvious. The if you knew them and you worked with them, like I worked with Monahan, and then to see him take that knee and take that direction, it was very disappointing. Same with O'Neill and Shea. They became so political. You know, the firing of Danny Pantaleo was just total politics. You know, it's been talked about. Did he do that to try and save the city? Did he sacrifice Danny Pantaleo to try and save the city because he thought there was going to be a riot if he wasn't terminated? I don't know, but I think he knew in his heart, and I think you could tell even when he announced his termination, that he wasn't doing the right thing. That he wasn't doing the right thing, and he should have stood up and said, you know, listen, it's a horrible situation, but he did what he was trained to do, and he was and he did what he was sent there to do, specifically against.
Yeah, and didn't he fire Barry too? Sergeant Barry from the 4.3 who shot the EDP with the bat. I believe he also did that too. So I mean, you know, you can't. I don't know. You have to be a man of your convictions, and if coming up through the ranks, and you know what the cops have done and what everybody's done, and the situations, how dynamic it was. In fact, I remember. Yeah, QCB says he threw Barry under the bus. If you remember, I was on that job. I remember I responded after the Sergeant Barry shot the female, but she came at him with a bat, and I remember it was weird because I don't know if you remember when you went up to the range, they used to have a guy with in the targets, they had a guy with a bat, and after that, they were told to take it away. They were told to get it off there.
Silhouette, right?
Yeah. And that to me was like, oh my God. And how bad is that the politics? And you know what? When you say about like you know, Pantaleo and O'Neill trying to protect the city, you know what? The city has been shit all along. So I don't understand why you could let things happen. And John's correcting me. Barry was under Adams. So Was O'Neill there? Or O'Neill was. I thought it was O'Neill was still there though.
He was fired under Adams.
Yeah, but I think
He was
was it
fired.
was it was
The
O'Neill
incident. The incident might have happened under O'Neill, but
under
he was
Barry?
actually
Yeah,
fired under
yeah.
Eric Adams. Fired him.
But I mean, your job there is and what I was trying to say was that we've been in turmoil when something's gone wrong. Okay, when Kiko Garcia was shot up in the 3-4 years ago, and the city started riots. Guess what? We're good at quelling riots. Okay, we can do that. So whatever the case, whatever happens, but don't make a cop a sacrifice or a sergeant a sacrifice because you want to make sure that the city doesn't burn down. Our job is good, and we can definitely quell anything that happens. Yeah, I was almost
John. We're getting fact checked by John in real time. It happened under O'Neill, and he was fired under Adams.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. I remember being on the job. So, but anyway, it just happens. So I mean, you really got to protect. Don't throw cops or sergeants or anybody on the job under the bus for your own political career. So, well,
Detective Nolan saying I'm going through the comments too fast. Trying to keep up. And then Jagged is saying that I'm interrupting you and not letting you finish your sentence.
Oh, I'm not gonna deny that one.
Sorry about that.
It's a conversation. It's all right. But yeah, it's all water over the bridge, as they say.
All right. All right. We took a left turn there.
Yeah, we did.
That's all right. We interact with our chat, and brought us to a different conversation. So we're an hour and 47 minutes in. Don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe. Let's get the algorithm going. Keep it going, and let's get those subscriptions up. We're up to 176,000 subscribers on the Finest Unfiltered Network. Thank you very much for all your support.
Yeah.
Keep that going. You want to hit one more? You want to get to? I know you got to get out early. Do the
I can hit one more. I think I'm good. 1930 was my hard out. So.
So there's a video that was circulating. John had posted it, also reposted it, in regards to a bunch of cops struggling with an EDP on the street and having a hard time taking them into custody. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll discuss it.
This video is mad funny. I'm explaining this shit to y'all niggas, right? This nigga screaming, yelling, ah! Ah! He motherfucking pulling on my man's bike, so I'm coming over here to see what the fuck he doing, right? So the nigga glitching, right? Doing whatever the fuck he doing. I'm think like, what's up with this nigga? So I'm like, oh, it's this 3 bike that he pulling on. You heard? Then the nigga come to me. Yo, that was 3 bike. Now I'm thinking about the pop on me. Yo, it's going down. Oh shit. Yo, stop resisting, bro. He glitching. Oh, that nigga is strong, son. Yo, bro, that nigga is strong. Oh my god. Nah, son. Nah, son. You bugging, homie. Yo, homie, you tripping. Yo, homie, you tripping, homie. You tripping, bro. Yo, you tripping, homie. I ain't gonna lie. Yo, I fucked up with the audio. I fucking, yo, listen, OG got put on his fucking head. They planted this nigga like a tree. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, gang. Yo, bro, these niggas couldn't handle him. OG tried to come in the hell. He almost fucking died. Look at the pain in OG face right here. Look at the pain in his face. Oh my God. Look at the pain in his face, bro. I'm telling him like, nah, that's the nigga. OG hurt. Look at OG. Look at OG. Oh my God, son. Yo, bro, I can't believe what the fuck I was witnessing, bro. I never seen a nigga this strong before, bro. Like, you know when you see a nigga glitching off the PCP? Off the weapon? Look at this nigga right here. Strong as hell. Look how he eat this taser to the ass cheeks. No freaky. Watch this shit. Ah. Shit ain't nothing. It ain't nothing. Ain't no way this nigga's still going. Yo, look. Look, yo, this is crazy. Yo, bro. Nah, son. Nah, B. Nah, son. Yo, bro, look, he's still going. Yo, y'all niggas gotta hit the shack, B. Y'all gotta hit the shack, bro. I'm not gonna lie, y'all niggas gotta get in the shack. She broke your ribs, OG? Nigga dunked OG on his head, bro. Nigga done broke OG ribs.
Think you're muted.
There's a lot there with this video. And you know, you see him here. And you know, we could talk here about a couple of different things, right? We're going to talk about the diaphragm law and how it affected the absolute inability to take this EDP into custody, who's, you know, got that strength, adrenaline, that it's like next to impossible to get the person handcuffed. And you also have the question of how would the Department of Community Safety have handled this one, right? Instead of the police coming, have the social workers come, right? He's not violent. He's just irrational. He's just screaming at a wall, right? He wasn't threatening anybody, right? So would this be one of those calls for the Department of Community Safety? And how would they have handled it?
Yeah. They would have asked very nicely for the individual to get into the back of the ambulance and then would have erupted into a violent craziness inside the ambulance. I mean, I don't know, man. That's all hands on right there, right? So
you got the
crazy.
You good?
Yep.
So you got the one cop here who's a solo cop. Now, I don't know if that's a school and this cop's assigned to the school and he came out by himself, because he doesn't seem to have a partner. And cops don't work by themselves, right? Out in the street. So he's struggling to take him into custody because he's grabbing his arm, right? Because why? He's not allowed to use any force on his diaphragm. So now look at the tactical disadvantages that he now becomes in. Look at this. Look at this. He's got the cop bent over backwards, pulling on his jacket, pulling him down. Right? So you're not allowed to put any compression on the throat, the neck, the chest, or anything like that. But yet this EDP is doing it to the cop. And if it wasn't for OG, as he's being called, coming in and grabbing him off the cop, this cop could have been in some serious trouble right here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look at the position he's in. You know what really scares me is that there's a gun there, right? And if this EDP, and we talk about it, right? I think Robert Murphy spoke about it in the chat. You know, this EDP strength, right? There is an EDP strength, and there's also people on PCP, and there's people that just you know, get this superhuman strength, and there's a gun involved. That officer is in a position right there where if that individual wanted to grab that gun, he could have done it. Could have grabbed anything off the officer's gun belt. Very precarious position. And he's being flipped around. I mean, I think that there needs to be a change, or there needs to be some additional training for takedown. Like, John will often say, right? John and Eric will say that, when they went through training, right, they started with the guy on the ground and the guy's willing to give his hands behind his back. You can't get somebody's hands behind their back unless you are stronger than them or have a better technique. Because when somebody binds up and holds their hands like this, it is extremely, extremely hard. This individual, I mean, my opinion, superhuman strength. He's flipping that cop around. He's in control of that fight. That officer isn't. So, very precarious position.
I agree, and I think that the training that they're originally talking about, I don't know how they physically train you, but when the diaphragm law came out, they put out those videos that you had to watch, and that's what they're talking about. In the video, they showed you how to take a perpetrator and cuff them, but like you said, they were on the ground, and like it's brought up, when John and Eric are doing tactical, critiques. They're in a standing position. How is he supposed to take him down to the ground without controlling his head and torso, right? Because where the head goes, the body goes, right? So you used to be able to take them and bring them down and flip them down to the ground, whatever the case may be. You could put your arms around their chest and you could bring them down, because you're securing their arms, body slam them down, whatever the case may be. Here, you see him, he's grabbing his arm, trying to twist him around, trying to get control of him, and he can't control him. And this guy does like a reverse move on him, winds up getting the cop in a precarious position down to his own knees, and now he's bending the cop backwards, and he gets the cop where the cop has his vest and his jacket riding up. He's pulling him by his jacket's unzipped, and his vest is riding up his shirt, And if it wasn't for the civilian that came by and grabbed him around the head and pulled him off the officer, because look, the officer, only because that guy, that civilian, grabbed him, was the cop able to get back around to his knees before the second officer showed up to try and help. And he's still holding on. He's still like the OG, whatever you want, the guy was calling him, is still kind of on the bottom. But again, here you see, you have one cop laying on his legs, one cop grabbing at his arms. Now you see the female cop come in holding her radio and grabbing the other hand with one hand. You see the other cop start to get involved, grab at the hand, but they're not controlling him because why? Because they aren't allowed and they're fearful to put now there. Inadvertently, she's now laying on top of him, putting pressure on his chest, right? Now, in the law, right, the New York City diaphragm law makes it a misdemeanor for a police to restrain individuals by compressing the diaphragm, sitting, kneeling, or standing on the chest or back in a way that restricts breathing during the arrest. Passed in 2020, this law was upheld by the state's highest court in 2023. So one of the things that is in there is that, it has to be shown that it wasn't intentional, right? So if it's unintentional, you're not going to get charged. But then the argument will be that you have to correct yourself immediately once you realize that you're leaning on his chest now.
Yeah, I mean, the police officer's hands are completely tied. I mean, I think you kind of have to make a decision, and based on the person's actions, whether or not you're going to take him into custody with, 2 or 3 or 4 people. Because it's sad, because it's very difficult to do with all the restrictions on you. And in the back of your mind, you're wondering whether or not, you should do anything, or wait for additional backup to help you. So I just think that it's very, very difficult, and it puts them in a really, really hard way. So, I mean, could you wait for backup? I think they could, or could they just go 98? I don't know if they could, but At that point, it was a very difficult decision, and they're very, very violent. So EDPs are tough. When they start acting like that, they're very tough to control. That's why ESU has a Y bar. That's why ESU has tools and stuff to hold somebody down. Where I don't see the patrol supervisor there, but Velcro straps or things like that. Try to start getting control. It's still a difficult situation, and the laws impede the officers and their capability to do their job. So.
Yeah. And it's just look, they can't control him, and nobody is grabbing the torso, controlling the torso. The one officer, I think she's got her arm over his head now, but it's the back. It's not on his throat because she's trying to get the other hand. And it just gets worse. Now more
Yeah.
officers show up. And they have the same problem. They're getting knocked all over the place because all they're doing is grabbing arms and legs. And that is not an effective way to control somebody and get them and gain compliance. All these officers are just pulling at the arms and legs.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I agree with KB. NYC right there. This is one of the many jobs that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's absolutely, they're doing their best that they can, and there's the restrictions on them, the ability, and it's very tough. They're very tough to do what they're doing. So, and I agree with what you just put up with 92 Charlie. This may be one of those jobs where you kind of would want to isolate and contain. Do you remember the old training video they used to have? I think it was right off the Grand Central. They showed an EDP up against those apart. You know where the police academy is, the new police academy, and across the Grand Central, there's all those apartment complexes.
Yeah.
It seemed that they filmed it right on that wall, and there was an EDP, and the two officers just got out and they isolated and contained and waited for emergency service or whatever. This might be one of those cases. If the EDP hasn't stormed anybody or tried anything, or is unarmed or whatever at that time, and not a threat to anybody else, you can isolate and contain. It's not a bad idea.
I don't know. It's just another example of the restrictions that are placed on cops and how it's next to impossible to do your job. And they tell you what you can't do, but don't give you the options and explain to you what you should be doing instead. How do you effectively bring somebody into custody when you can't control their torso? And you have to control their torso by the use of restrictive measures.
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to, be asked about, training or whatever, or what they should do, I mean, I think the best thing, if you want to make sure that they don't violate any of the holds or the, pressure to the diaphragm or whatever, extremities, grab each extremity and push it down, hold one person, two people on one arm, two people on the other arm, one person on each leg, and control the person. That's the best bet. But it's gonna be personnel and manpower intense. They need a couple people to do that. So before you even take that action, you're gonna have to get backup. You're gonna get additional resources there, because if two people like that, you're not gonna be able to do it on your own. So, and I hate to I always bring it up, but I hate to say it, but if you're wrestling with that guy and he's whipping you around like that, don't be afraid. Tactical retreat, man. You don't have to take that abuse, right? Then you can isolate and contain, right? But it's not against our policies and procedures to do a tactical retreat and reassess, reevaluate, and then maybe take the action.
Yeah. I don't know. Anything else?
No, I mean, it's sad that the police officers on this day are stuck with all these, things. Yeah, and you really have to protect yourself before you do
And
anything. So
yeah, and it makes you look foolish. It makes the cops look like they're inept and they're improperly trained. Well, they are improperly trained because nobody's trained you how to do it without using force or controlling the torso or the head. And like you said, put one or two people on each leg. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. And you hear the commentator there that's taking the video. Oh, these guys got to go to the gym. They got to hit the gym. They got to hit the gym. Like you said in the past, we've all said it. Unless you've tried to put somebody in handcuffs that really doesn't want to go into handcuffs, especially somebody that's in some type of emotional crisis and gets that extra boost, somebody called the EDP strength or whatever you want to call it. There's other terms out there, but that's real. That jolt of adrenaline, that superpower is real when people are in those types of crises. And to try and put somebody into cuffs is not an easy task. And, like you said, putting each person attacking a different limb is really the only way to kind of do it in a situation like that. And that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And cops are getting knocked around. They're getting pushed. One cop's getting pushed into the other cop, getting knocked on his ass. That one poor cop, the initial cop, almost gets choked out. If it wasn't for a civilian, we don't know what could have happened. Pepper spray is your friend. Use it. In that situation, pepper spray is not going to work. You're going to wind up just pepper spraying all the other cops, and it's not going to be effective. It's just not. Because now what you're doing is you're putting the other cops at a tactical disadvantage.
Who
If they
gets
tried to
affected by
pepper spray him before he tried to take him into custody, then he would be charged with excessive force, abuse of authority, violating the rights, abusing an emotionally disturbed person, and everything else. So you're saying use it initially, and that's what I'm saying. If the first officer would have walked up and that person wasn't compliant, they're going to say that if you mace that person, that you are abusing your authority, that you are using excessive force, and that we're brutalizing these people. And that's why you need the Department of Community Safety to come in, because if they would have come in, these mental health workers who haven't been identified at what title or what qualification, whether they're going to be social workers or psychologists or psychiatrists, nobody knows, right? Somebody with a counseling certificate, who knows? They're going to say that they would have came in and been able to diffuse the situation there. It's not happening.
Yeah. I want to 92 Charlie, like he said, no way. If you're in the fight, you need to do what you have to do to subdue the and then explain later. And then I think later on he commented that he would take the hit. Listen, I'm old school, bro. I would do the same, but I wouldn't do it now. I wouldn't tell my kid to do that, because you're going to end up being, locked up or in trouble or whatever. I don't think it's not going to be an easy hit either. You see termination all the time. So, yeah, do I agree with you? Absolutely. I would have done that, but I think, you take the hit. Yeah. All right. It's not the hit of the old days. It's not going to be a little bit, warn and admonish. It's not going to be a loss of a couple hours. It's going to be a whack, man. And who knows, God forbid something happens. You could end up losing your job completely. So that's my opinion on that. But in the old school, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not there anymore. And so.
Yeah. And then KB saying it's no longer hit, it's a collar. That's what I'm saying. And then people saying it's less than lethal. I understand it's less than lethal, but they're going to say that that's not how the emotionally disturbed person should be treated. That we shouldn't. That's the problem that they use, and they would use this as an example as to why Department of Community Safety is needed, because the police come in and they used force against him preemptively, because that's what we're taught, right? You're taught that if someone's non-compliant, you have the right to use the OC spray. You have the right to use the taser, right? Somebody else said, who was it? KB, Ride the Lightning. He's talking about, the use of the taser. They are justified in that situation. But can you fault the cop for not doing it nowadays with all of the scrutiny that they're under? All right. Let's move on to our final segment here. Ask an Executive. It's when you can ask Ron or Rob answer questions from the chat. A lot of times people don't have the access to NYPD executives. Here you have the access to retired inspector, retired deputy chief. So ask any questions you want on or off topic inside of the chat. Otherwise, you could DM us offline at Exec Perspective on X, or you can email us at theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com. We'll review your questions. If we feel they're appropriate, we'll read them out, copy and paste them, read them out on the next show. We will keep your identification confidential, so you don't have to worry about that. We understand that active members of the service cannot have their names given because they're worried about certain retaliatory things. So at 6:19 p.m., Sleepy Joe had a question. How different was each level of BMOC, particularly from sergeant to then lieutenant? So again, BMOC was the leadership course that you took after you passed the exam and you're getting promoted to sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. You go to the basic leadership course, then the advanced leadership course for sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. So what did you feel the difference was, Rob, between sergeant to lieutenant?
Yeah, so right, so you said like BMOC was the basic management orientation course. I think for lieutenant was the advanced leadership course, and for captain was the command leadership course. And yeah, it was very interesting to do the BMOC for the sergeant because it's new, right? You knew it was all new to you. You learned things. I mean, there was a lot of the cops are gonna fuck you and don't do this, and the cops are gonna do that. So you got to be the boss, which what you kind of expected them to say that, and then you took from whatever they told you, and then you went back to the command, and you learned from your guys or whatever how to be there were a lot of good cops that would teach you how to be a sergeant too. So and then when you went to lieutenants, I don't know, it was similar. I didn't really think that I found anything different. To the captain's course, well, it became the introduction of CompStat, the higher level of accountability, doing the duties and the more responsibilities and stuff. So that's where it changed a little bit. But from cop to sergeant, that was a big leap, and from sergeant to lieutenant, felt it was the same crap. And then from lieutenant to captain, yeah, they introduced new things because you had a greater amount of responsibility.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, obviously everybody knows that the hardest transition is going from police officer to sergeant. You're no longer responsible for just yourself and your partner in the car. You're responsible for an entire squad or a platoon, depending on what you're doing. You're now the guy that they're going to the answers to for the answers, the guy or the girl. So there's a lot of BS just like in the academy. In the academy, you learn the basics, right? You learn law, you learn police procedure. It's the same thing in BMOC, right? You go there and you get a bunch of lectures. You sit there, you do a mock desk where you're the desk officer, and there's no pressure like there is on the desk. The desk is a very daunting task when you're the desk officer because you're in charge of all command operations. You have these mandatory entries. Now, I don't know how it's going to be with the new electronic command log. I think it's going to be a lot easier. They may have, types of things where you can, check off, roll calls or whatever your mandatory entries are. You used to have that list, the cheat sheet, right? And go through all your entries. There'll probably be a drop-down menu where you can click on them and then add it'll be timestamped and you can add a personal piece to it. I would think that's the way you would do it. It would be the smart way, right? But you have that. You learn about what a 49 looks like, and they give you a packet of 49s, which are the typed letterheads, because as a sergeant, you're going to be doing a lot of typed letterheads for unusual occurrences. But they give you a package of redacted, 49s, but don't really teach you how to do it. You have to sit there and listen to internal affairs. You have to sit there and listen to quality assurance. You have to sit there while the job checks off all of the boxes to cover their ass that they're teaching their supervisors. But again, you don't really start learning until you get out in the street. And the difference between sergeant and lieutenant, when I studied for sergeant to lieutenant, there were 6 different procedures that had lieutenant specific duties. So being a lieutenant was just more responsibility, but the duties and responsibilities in the patrol guide, there was only 3 or 4, I think it was 6 duties in the entire patrol guide that were lieutenant specific. I'm sure it's different now. I'm sure there's a lot more procedures that are just for lieutenants and their responsibilities. But so there's not much of a transition when you go from sergeant to lieutenant. And BMOC, for me, it was a little different. It was we were the first class after 9/11, or the second class after 9/11 to get promoted. And the day that we reported to BMOC was the day that the plane crashed in the Rockaways. So we got, we were at a different time also mentally. That was my first 2-day swing, was when I went to lieutenant school, right? The advanced leadership course was my first 2-day swing when we went there it's Monday to Friday since 9/11, because I got promoted in 2001. So I don't remember much about the lieutenant school because I don't think they taught us much. There was just speakers would come in and, I don't even remember. And then, like you said, for captains, you had captains come in and talk about the duties. A captain come in to, give you advice on duties. But again, until you're out there and you're all by yourself and you're handling these things, that's when you really start to learn about it and really how to handle yourself. When you get into the command, they tell you about your responsibilities, and again, IUB comes in and all that stuff. But my thing,
what was funny? One time, they used to put on a chalkboard, like then what's going to happen the next day. Like the topics or whatever they were going to discuss, and they had put on the board, Captain Dolan, Health Services. So, you know what that was? It was the Dole test.
The Dole test. And you want to let? I never got doled. I never got doled for my captain's promotion.
No,
they didn't do it when we were in BMOC. They said, "Oh, they're going to call you in one day." I probably wasn't doled as a captain for a year. Wow. I was never doled for the actual promotion. It's weird. Because it's not mandatory. It's just you can't refuse it when you take the promotion.
Yeah.
But it's not mandatory.
No, it's not. It's not. What does they call it when it's just comes up on the list? I mean, they
random.
Yeah, it's not random. They can definitely do
random.
It.
They can do it right for your promotion.
Yeah.
Detective Nolan had asked earlier too if either one of us know the reputation of NYPD Chief John Guido. He retired back in '96. He was an IAB. He said later on after the Mullen Commission. I didn't know. I didn't know of him.
No.
So I don't know.
Neither did I.
KB asks, do you think they really need detectives and police officers in IAB when it's really sergeants who do the actual detective work? POs and detectives are really just gophers. Might be a better question for John since he worked in internal affairs. I don't know. I know what you're saying. The sergeants are the ones that do the casework. They are the case officers, and detectives and police officers, unless they're doing undercover work, they do intake with the phone calls and administrative work. And yeah, they pretty much are gophers. So I don't know the need for them in internal affairs. That's a good question maybe for John, since he spent time in internal affairs as a CCLB liaison. I don't know the inner workings that much. Do you?
No, I mean, I had done a 2 years as a sergeant in investigations, and there was no there was one police officer there, and an investigation wasn't considered a career track, right? So that person stayed a police officer. I mean, if you need police officers in IEB or you need police officers at the action desk, so be it. But I don't necessarily believe that it should be a investigative track. I think that kind of diminishes, the hard work that the officers do in the field, unless they're actually doing some sort of investigation work, unless they're actually doing it. But if they're not, then they shouldn't. And like Reed says, cops go there to get the shield at the IAB command center. I mean, if you're just literally answering the phone and taking a log, I don't see why that's a detective route, So I think it should be maybe position specific on what they're doing. So.
And then Detective Nolan's corrected me. It was the NAP commission, not the Marlin commission. Sorry.
Okay.
We're getting a lot of fact checking done on us today.
That's all right. It means they're active in the chat. That's all.
They're paying attention. They're actually paying attention to what we're saying. And they're calling out our bullshit.
That's it.
and then Detective Nolan also wants to know if we're going to be at Russo's on the Bay tonight, where the NYPD DEA is honoring Sid Rosenberg. As local as it is, not going to be there.
Yeah.
You're flying in for it, Rob?
There's absolutely, unequivocally no way I'm going to be there.
All right. Anybody have any other questions? I didn't see any others.
Wait, there was one about a detective. Did we either one of us a detective, and did we think that we should have been detectives? Like, do we miss not having that position?
I didn't see that. What time is that? I didn't see that.
I didn't write it down. I read it real quick.
Was it earlier?
Within the last hour. But that was it in some in substance. That's asking if either, I don't know, were you a detective or?
I was not a detective. I was in narcotics, and I got promoted to sergeant. And I went to if it was KB, he's asking it again. Were either of you a detective? If not, do you regret skipping that step?
Oh, yep, that's it. Yep.
Okay, so KB, Rob was not. I was not. I was in narcotics. I spoke about it on my show when I got interviewed by Eric and John, that I was forced to go to narcotics because I was on the sergeant's list in 1997. I was on the sergeant's list, and there was so many of us in the position that passed the test with 3 years on and couldn't get promoted for another year and a half. They put us into narcotics against our will. And so I went there, and I got promoted just a few weeks prior to, I got promoted to sergeant a few weeks prior to getting my 18 months that I would have had in narcotics to get my detective shield. Do I regret it? I don't regret it, because 6 months, you never know when the next promotion is going to be. It's not a guarantee that the promotion would have been 1 month later, 2 weeks later, 2 months later. And they were talking about, there was a lieutenant's test that was coming up 6 months after my promotion. I was able to take the lieutenant's exam. So there was the fear that they were promoting such a big class, because there was 100 sergeants got promoted. It was a huge class of sergeants. My sergeant shield was actually, I was the first one to wear my sergeant shield. They minted the sergeant shields because we went above the number of shields that were out there. So I had 5174. The guy next to me had 5175, 5176, 5178 as we went down the line, because we all had brand new minted shields. I was afraid that they weren't going to promote another class for a while, because they're filling up so many positions that they had been waiting for our class to be eligible for. And so I didn't pass it up. And it's not like today. Today it would have been different, because if you get promoted to detective and then you get promoted to sergeant, even if you're 1 day as a detective, and you get promoted to sergeant, you jump to top pay sergeant. When I became a sergeant in 1998, you got half of your total pay increase the day you got promoted. The second year, you got like $100. And then at the end of the third year, you got the remaining balance. So it's not like today where you get everything at the end. Like now, guys get promoted and they have to wait 4 years to get the top pay as a sergeant. And when you get promoted, you actually, you could lose money just on your base salary because of night differential. If you were a 4 to 12 or a midnight cop and you became a sergeant, you're a day tour sergeant, you're actually physically losing money right there without not even counting the overtime. You're losing money. So had the situation been different, maybe I would have passed myself over voluntarily to get my detective shield, and then I would have went to top pay. But I didn't. Do I regret it? I don't know. Sometimes, just at this point, because I did the time in narcotics, the only thing different would be, an extra shield on the plaque. That's all it would have been at this point, because I did the work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very prestigious position.
Yeah.
To be a detective of the NYPD, I mean, world renowned as being, the best detectives in the world. And I agree. And it would have been nice, but I mean, when I got promoted to sergeant, I had already I was in anti-crime, and I had just finished my interview for narcotics, and I was told after I got promoted that they were going to pick me up, but I didn't get in there, so I just stayed. I stayed as a sergeant. I didn't have the opportunity to be a detective, so and it is what it is. So it would have been nice, yeah, but it was all right.
And Al Gonzalez is saying that pepper spray is authorized to take an EDP into custody. Please refer to the patrol guide. I understand what's authorized. We know what's authorized. The question isn't what's authorized or not. It's the perception and how the job may come at you and how others may come at you. That was our point.
Yeah. So is Art BP7? He says spot on, Rob. Best detective in the world. So that evens us up.
There you go.
And I agree. So
There you go.
and 92 Charlie likes my my shadow box on the wall. So good old Constitution.
I missed that one.
I was right above Art.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for all your comments, your questions, your inquiries. We appreciate it. And again, you could DM us at Exec Perspective on X, or you can email us at theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com for any future questions that you have offline. And we'll get back to you either way, even if we don't think that some questions we don't think are appropriate for the show, but we will get back to you and answer you. So, all right. So coming up on Friday, we have New York's Finest Tried and Unfiltered podcast at 08:05 with John, Eric, and Marlon. It'll be the Friday roundtable. If you want to go back and look at today's show, they had Larry Sharp, who's running for New York State governor. It was an interesting. He's an interesting candidate. You're not going to agree with everything he has to say, but he admits that and he knows that, and he says he's not going to pander, and he didn't pander. He stuck to what he was going to say. So go back and take a look at that situation. And then they'll be back again on Monday. They'll be talking about all that's going on with the NYPD and local politics. Tuesday at where is it? I wrote it down. Tuesday at 7:05, you have the 10-4 Tavern with Tommy Joyce, Pete Pacelli. Pete Pacelli is going to be on vacation next week, or he's actually going to be at an event. So he's not going to be on the show. So Tom's going solo. He's going to have an interview of a retired special agent in charge, Paul Eckloff. He was the U.S. Secret Service Presidential Detail. That should be an interesting conversation to hear. He was on the presidential detail for the U.S. Secret Service, and he's a fraud expert. So Tom will be there for that show. And I highly recommend that you go and listen to last night's show from the Tenboard Tavern, where you have a retired ATF undercover, Lou Veloz. Very interesting stories, very humble man, told some stories about long-term and short-term undercover jobs that he did with the ATF. I co-hosted that with Pete Vaselli because Tom is out having some family time on the high seas. So definitely go back and give that a look on the recorded episode under the Finest Unfiltered on YouTube. And then we'll be back next Wednesday. Oh, no, I'll be back next Wednesday. Lily, I see you're still on there. Next week, Rob will be taking some family time, and I'll be on with Joe Cortesis, and we'll be talking about the facial recognition. That's next Wednesday at 5:05 p.m. So Rob's here today, as we see.
I mean, it's not a false facial recognition. It's true.
Right. So, and we'll be back. I'll be back next week. So until then, everybody, thank you very much and be safe.